Okay.
And we are live.
Okay. All right. It's 7 o'clock and I will call today's March 9th council meeting to order. We have an agenda in front of us. Does anybody have any additions to the agenda? Seeing none, just a motion to accept the agenda as presented. Councillor Auld, all in favor of that motion? And that's carried. Thank you. Okay, we don't have any delegations. We have the previous minutes from our March 2nd meeting. Everybody's had a chance to read those minutes. Okay, Councillor Phillips.
I'll make a motion to adopt the meeting minutes of March 2nd, 2021.
Okay. All in favor of that motion? That's carried. Okay, we don't have delegation business or old business, so we'll move right on to 7.1, new business, and I will turn that over. It's the RFD for the Rocky Curling Club loan extension. I'll turn that over to you, Mr. Ament.
Good evening, Mayor and
Good
Council.
evening.
So the first item of my presentations tonight are dealing with the Rocky Curling Club loan extension. As Council's aware, we've been working with the Curling Club over the last year, reviewing the terms of their operating agreement and options for the future operations of the club. We've met with the Curling Club representatives throughout 2020 as we updated their operating agreement and dealt with the challenges presented by both the town and the Curling Club related to COVID-19. And then most recently, administration met with the Curling Club again in February of 2021 to discuss options for the operation of the club and repayment of the outstanding portion of their arena and Rocky Curling Club upgrades. So the Curling Club attended council meeting back in March of 2020. That time the club indicated, based on their financial situation, the outlook and without changes to address the current financial obligations as per the current agreement, there was some concern and potential that the club would not be able to meet their commitment as early as this year. The Curling Club did present 4 options at that time, and council, I guess, is familiar with those options that were presented. They did submit a letter to council in August related to the COVID-19 pandemic and requested deferral of the annual loan payment and a 1-year extension of the operating agreement, and that was granted by council at that time. Administration has met again with the Curling Club, as I mentioned, in February to continue discussions related to the future of the club. And one of the things that was determined in our conversations was perhaps the best option at this time was to restructure the term of their loan. And the finance department has determined that the balance remaining on that loan is $592,100. And the club has requested to restructure the payment of the loan over 15 years. That would bring the annual loan payment down to $39,400 per year, which would be much more manageable for the club and make them a little bit more, provide long-term sustainability for the club. I guess going on, assuming the sponsorship that's always been part of the agreement that was with the club is the naming sponsor for the Christensen Center. Portion of that sponsorship also went towards the repayment of the club's loan. And so that was originally in a 10-year agreement. And so with that, extending on for the next 5 years, out of the $39,400, $30,000 of that would be from the sponsorship, and the club would be responsible for $9,400 for the next 4 or 5 years. And again, the club understands that if that sponsorship happens to go away, they would be responsible for that total amount. In our discussions, we did talk with the club beyond that 5 years. Should the sponsorship continue, that what we talked about was that the town would retain the full amount of the sponsorship after the initial 5 years, as that was originally a 10-year agreement. And at this point, the club is okay with that arrangement. again, the sponsorship has always been, if we're not sure what will happen after the full 10-year term. So I guess the administration would recommend to council at this time that they approve extending the term of the Rocky Curling Club's loan to 15 years, with the sponsorship funds to be included in the curling club loan payment for 5 years, which was the balance of the 10-year term. And following that, the club would be responsible for the full $39,400 for the additional 10 years, with the town retaining the full sponsorship funds. And then I guess second to that, administration would also recommend at this time that the council approve extending the operating agreement for an additional 5 years. So if there's any specific questions related to the request.
I think this is a viable option. I don't see any other option for them right now at this point, and I think they need our support. And definitely, this past year has been hard on all clubs and groups, and I think this is it's a good suggestion in my books. So, Councillor Phillips.
I agree. I mean, the curling club is a very important part of our community, and this is a way to hopefully keep them on a good financial terms for a long term.
Councillor Auld.
I'm just curious, do you know if the sponsorship funds aren't there, does the curling club have the ability to make that payment?
They have indicated that it would be a challenge for them, but they could make a go, at least in the next 5 years. If that sponsorship continues, that will allow them to perhaps put a little bit of money aside that going forward for the remainder, should that sponsorship not be there, it would help them in that regard. It would also help with perhaps future capital, if they replaced equipment or those types of things, it would put them in a position to be able to do that.
Because that sponsorship amount isn't there this year. Is that correct?
No, we received only a portion of the sponsorship for 2020.
Right.
We're still awaiting to hear from the sponsor about the 2021 portion.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Fraser and then Councillor Wright.
I think in either case, the 39,000 is much more realistic for that group to sustainably pay for it going forward. I think the 109,000, that's a number from a different time. So if this can help them stay in that space and help them keep their group going, I think it makes sense.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Narang.
We don't have a debenture on that, do we? Or no, so there's no interest being no. Okay.
Any other questions, comments? Okay, Councillor Phillips.
If there's no further discussion, I'd like to make a motion that council approve the restructuring of the Rocky Curling Club loan for a 15-year term in the amount of $39,400 per year, with the first payment due prior to November 15th, 2021. The curling club will retain 50% share of the sponsorship for the next 5 years to be applied to the loan payment, and will be responsible for the entire restructured amount of the balance of the loan agreement.
Everybody clear on that motion? Any other comments or questions? Okay, all in favor of that motion? And that's carried. Thanks, Mr. Emmett.
And
I'd like to make that motion if there's no further discussion or questions.
Mike.
Test. Okay, I'd like to make the second motion, if there's no further discussion or questions. Be it resolved that council approve the extension of the annual operating agreement for an additional 5 years to be reviewed annually.
Everybody clear on that motion? Thanks, Councillor Brown. All in favor of that motion? And that's carried. Thank you.
Oh my God.
So we're going to move on to 7.2. Recreation Facility Operations Update. Mr. Ament, that is yours as well. I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you again. So as council is aware that we've had numerous announcements from the province with relation to, the opening or the moving to step 2 of the path forward in response to COVID-19. The changes to step 2 included easing some restrictions for indoor fitness and included low intensity activity, as well as reopening the libraries with restrictions. Now since this report was written, the province announced on Tuesday some further lifting restrictions. Those announcements really didn't affect the proposal that we have here today. So I just wanted to give council a little bit of an update of where we're at. So on January 28th, obviously the province announced the path forward, 4 steps outlining an outline for sectors that will see graduate restriction changes based on hospitalization benchmarks. Step 1, permitted school activities within our facilities for phys ed classes and some recreation and fitness activities. Step 1 also allowed one-to-one fitness activities. These were restricted to private one-on-one instruction for the pool, arena, and fitness center. Limited facility use with these activities did not make it financially feasible to open the facilities at that time. On March 1st, the province announced a move to step 2 in the path forward, which allowed for indoor fitness allowed to open for low intensity activities. Now, I did include in my report the definitions that the province had for low intensity individual and group exercises and what was allowed, not allowed within their documents. So we've been trying to work within the wording that the government has provided us, and upon evaluating the types of activities that would be allowed, we would realistically or could realistically open the fitness center with restrictions on which equipment could be used. Low intensity fitness classes such as gentle fitness and a couple of varieties of our yoga classes would be permitted. Certain pieces of equipment would lend themselves to high intensity activity would not be opened, but the light lifting of weights and weight machines would be permitted. So we're looking to accommodate a reopening of the gym. Administration has proposed opening reduced hours that would match the current hours of the arena. So from Tuesday to Friday from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. and Saturdays from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. This would require rehiring a couple of our guest services staff that have been received temporary layoff notice. They would be involved in taking reservations, checking in the users, and monitoring the use of the equipment. That's one of the challenges that we will have, is because we're asking our patrons not to exert themselves too strenuously. So it's incumbent on us to monitor that as well. The hours could be adjusted, I guess, if the use is low or if the province further lifts restrictions. They announced yesterday that the next announcement for possible lifting of or going to step 3 would be March the 22nd would be the next possible. So if council approves reopening the gym, we would be able to start bookings, the visits immediately. We've actually, our fitness center supervisor just created an online booking calendar through Google Docs. And so that what would work, it would be potentially a 3-day book ahead. Really, I think an effective way to do those online bookings. Everything has to be by appointment. There's no drop-in bookings would be accepted. I'm saying if we went the Tuesday to Friday, we could potentially start next Tuesday, depending on how quickly I can onboard staff. If council approves it, we could potentially be open for the weekend, this weekend. But so at this point, unless there's any questions related to the potential of gym operations, I welcome any questions.
So I'm just wondering, financially, are we going to be at a great loss by opening and hiring a couple of staff members? Should we just hold off for another couple of weeks and then open it, when they allow us to do a little bit more?
I think with the staff coming back, to be honest, our facility we've got staff there. We're right in the process of getting started with moving towards our new recreation booking system. The staff will not only be able to assist with that, there's a lot of data migration and those types of administrative tasks that need to have that our current staff are, basically have their hands full with that. So not only would they be able to assist with the gym openings, but also assisting with some of those administrative duties that are sort of ramping up as we move to our new recreation software.
So you're saying a couple. So do you mean specifically 2 people or 3 or like a couple?
Right now, we're looking at one of our full-time staff
Okay,
and then one casual staff that would work the evenings. So we'd
Okay.
have one extra person during the day, and then another person would work the evening shift Monday to Friday.
Mr. Fraser and then Mr. Phillips. So I just have a question because.
You've been on the calls with Dr. Hinshaw, so 10 people can be on the ice at one time, but 10 people can't be in the pool for lessons or. So I've had a lot of questions about the pool, so.
Right, they follow the same guidelines. The ice usage is 10, which will include a coach, as long as they can social distance the 3 meters. I think from a pool perspective, I think it's a little harder to have 10 people and allow them to social distance within the lanes. They can't share lanes. So some of the challenge there, we're getting lots of calls as well about the pool opening. With the restrictions, we can offer one-on-one lessons, one-on family lessons. We could have individual training. We technically could offer aquafit classes, which would be geared to a low intensity, but the total number of people that could be in the building at any one time, unless a family wanted to book the entire facility, which is also allowed, doesn't really lend itself to the same financial abilities as opening up the gym.
I just do one follow-up.
sure.
And I guess my other question is about the pool staffing, just because I know there's a fair bit of training. What's the lead time that we need to get everyone that we need with all the training back? Because I know a lot of the students are looking for summer jobs now, and it looks like the pool's not going to be open for another few weeks at least.
When we reopened in August, we had brought all of our staff up on their training and certifications at that time for that relaunch. So I don't anticipate there's going to be a lot of additional training that we'll need for certifications when we open up. Ideally, yes, I would like to bring a couple of people back just to get us in a position for when the government makes that announcement. But again, that was not part of my report today.
Councillor Phillips and then Councillor Narang.
I like the recommended alternative. The private gyms are open now. They have been open for a while. I think we're able to reopen part of this facility at least. We should be opening it. And I also further like the fact that we have in here that if more restrictions come off, this decision doesn't have to come back to council. It can just happen as the restrictions come off. I'm fully in support of this administration recommendation.
Councillor Narang.
Just to carry on a little bit of what Councillor Fraser was talking about. I know we're not talking about the pool right now, but I just wanted it to be noted that it was really important that when the arena was open, that you had a commitment from ICE users to have that time booked, which was why we were able to move forward and open and keep the ICE services in, which from the pool perspective wasn't the same thing. It was sort of a wait and hope that somebody would come to make it financially viable. Is that correct?
Yes, I think that's a fair statement.
Okay.
I think ultimately it's a philosophical at what role does the municipality play in the health and wellness of our community, and at what financial, situation do we want to take? I mean, I know that we're really being mindful of our spending. especially when we're not bringing in any revenue. Certainly from the arena side of things, we're able to generate revenue with the ice rentals. That's maybe not quite as prevalent because the pure numbers of people that we can have in the pool at any one time doesn't make it that same financial ability.
So you're saying how many people can be in the gym then at one time?
Right now, the way we have it set up, we anticipate we could have up to 18 people in the gym at any one time. The system we're putting into place will allow people to, on 10-minute increments, we can have up to 3 people booking at any one time. And then we can stagger that. So not on an hourly basis. So you have 18 people showing up at 9 o'clock, or so we're staggered that throughout the day. We don't anticipate that that's going to happen, but the system we're putting into place will allow people to book their time. Okay, I'm going to come in and book an hour. We're limiting the bookings to 1 hour at a time, but they can stagger when they want to attend. And we have the ability to say, no, we've already got more than enough. And the next available booking time would be this time.
Councillor Brown?
Just could you clarify for us, what is the maximum number of people that will be in the gym at any one time?
Well, when we were open last summer, August, we were going at our 25% capacity. So based on the way, I guess we can have as many people because everything, all the equipment is 3-meter distance apart. And that's the key, that the province doesn't state how many. It's all about whether they can maintain the 3-meter social distancing. And in talking with our fitness center supervisor and the calculations she's done, at any given time, we could probably have as many as 18 people in the gym at one time.
Great, thank you.
And what about the spaces for, say, a yoga class?
We have the subway room that we were using previously that does allow for those classes to take place with the required 3-meter social distancing. So we have spaces within the facility that will accommodate those classes.
Do we know if our other yoga studios are open again in town? They're not. So I'm struggling here because our other businesses aren't opening to full capacity yet. And I'm struggling with that.
The private gyms are open. They're doing this type of low intensity training now. It's been going on for at least a week in the public or private gyms. I think for sure our gym should be open again. It's not, there's a dollar and cents figure that adds into this, yes, but as Mr. Ment had alluded to, there's also the mental well-being of our citizens, and I think this is more along the lines of health and wellness, and should be considered that way.
But we also have to make sure we're being financially feasible or responsible with this opening. I guess I'd like to hear that financial impact. Like,
I guess when it comes, there's 2 things. Our members that we've had, many of them have already paid their membership. So those funds have been collected. We're just at this point, they're not able to utilize that. So by opening the facility, really the cost of opening is the cost of the one full-time and 1 part-time staff member. The building is open, the heat is on, so financially that doesn't make a whole lot of difference. But yeah, so it's one of those things that, by allowing our existing members to return, and even though it's not as much as we would like with the high intensity training that many of them do participate in, but it is a start.
Councillor Fraser and then Councillor Narang.
I'm wondering if some of the places that do classes that are closed because their spaces are physically a lot smaller, if we could work with them so they could utilize the subway room or possibly the loose soffit where they could do the physical distancing, just until some of those roll back, so we're not seen as competing with them, but trying to help them keep their customer base.
How would you see that working? Would you see them paying a fee to rent the space then, or how?
Yes, probably a fee, because there have to be, there's some administrative work there to make sure that the room is sanitized in between. But maybe we can look at what a lower rate would be just to help them. Because if they can only have 2 or 3 people in their studio, that doesn't make sense for them. But if they can have a group of 10 or 9 people in them, because they can spread out, it might make it worth it. I'm not sure what they would need. I'm not sure what their financial situation is, or if that would be of interest, but it might be worth it to see, even if they could get things up and running again. If the space is the issue, we have space.
Councillor Narang?
Yeah, I think that's a really great idea to potentially explore. And I was just gonna piggyback off what Mayor Burke was saying. Like, we have businesses that provide these services in town that are suffering. And I just don't know that if it's, I mean, the one that we can provide, which is the pool, which no other private industry is providing, that I'm sort of on the fence a little bit too about whether or not we should be opening. Maybe because there's already memberships paid, I can understand opening the weights, but to be opening up to classes when we have studios that are shut down, I just don't know that that's a good idea.
Yeah, Mr. Ament?
It's my understanding that a couple of our private contracted fitness instructors are actually doing virtual classes, throughout this time in order to keep their clients happy. They're doing that privately, but we would work with them to potentially come back to offering the classes. I believe we do serve a different clientele, I think, than some of the private gyms. We each have their own niche markets and those types of things. But certainly valid comments.
Councillor Brown and then Councillor Fraser.
Just curious as to what kind of feedback you're getting from the community in terms of, related industry. Yeah, from other related, not too much. I mean, the phone calls that we're fielding is gone from when are you going to open as to why are you not open? Those are, in talking with our guest services supervisor, 80% of her day is almost spent on the phone answering those types of calls right now.
Councillor Fraser?
And I agree with Councillor Narank that normally I don't think we should be competing. But I agree that we do have a different clientele and they have paid for their memberships. Like, we have collected the money. So if there are private businesses open and we're not open, that's discouraging people from purchasing a Rocky Pass in the future, because they can't be open when their friends are all going to their gyms. So I think for paid memberships because the other problem is we then have to refund memberships like we did last year when things closed down. So I'd like to avoid that situation if possible.
Okay, Councillor Phillips?
And the memberships are paid, and that's something we have to remember. They have been paid. They are a different clientele than what some of the other gyms use or have. And, we owe it to these people that have paid memberships to be able to use this facility because they have paid. We have the opportunity to open. And I'm hearing the same comments. Why aren't we open? Not why we should be open, but why aren't we open? Because we're allowed to. So therefore we should have this facility open.
Right. And the questions that we're having here, or the discussion we're having here, is it financially feasible for the town of Rocky Mountain House to open? Those are the questions that, we do need to make sure that we have some sort of answer to. So. Councillor Phillips?
And I mean, the light, heat, all of that is static. That's never going to change whether we're open or not open. The only difference is going to be the couple of staff members. And the usage, I would think should cover those staff members' wages. I would anticipate, correct me if I'm wrong.
So shouldn't anticipate, Betty has a question, and then Councillor Narang.
Well, no, I just wanted to comment on the financial impact, and Councillor Phillips is correct. Right now, we're paying all the operating costs for the facilities, so those costs are occurring no matter what. Excuse me, what is being proposed is basically 2 staff coming back, so it would be an additional 80 hours per week. I don't have their salaries, but it would end up being a couple $1,000 a week to open up. We're probably only looking at a couple weeks. If things keep progressing positively, then we could see wider hours and more opening. So there would be a small increase in costs. As far as the revenue, right now, any current memberships would be suspended, like they're kind of on hold. So we would release those. So that will generate new monies in the future, because then their memberships will expire. And it's actually really interesting. If you do look at your budget books, I split out guest services this year so that we kind of have 3 programs. We've got guest services, programming, and fitness. And fitness actually is, I don't know if it's quite break even, but it's very, very close, as opposed to, say, the arena or the pool. So they do generate, they're almost self-sustaining. So I think it will cost us, but it's quite nominal in terms of what it would cost for a short term. The biggest thing is, if you're concerned about competing with other businesses, and the mental health or social factor, I think things you have to weigh.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Narang.
I just wanted to clarify that I wasn't advocating that we don't open the gym, like the weight training. I was just not wanting to advertise, say, yoga classes and things like that when our in-town yoga studio is unable to be open. I know that there's a different demographic. And I think largely even with the yoga classes, there probably is a bit of a different demographic there as well. So just wanted to clarify.
Okay, thank you. And I would like to clarify too. So we are talking 1.5 staff members or 2 staff members?
It'll be
2 staff members, 1 full-time, which would be 40 hours a week, and the other right now would be 16 hours a week,
16, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
1.5.
Any other comments, questions?
Councillor Ald.
Just listening to Betty and Wes, I think it's definitely made up my mind. We need to open up to where we can, and the money is irrelevant basically at this point. So I think we need to open it up.
Okay, any other conversation, comments? Okay, what's council's wishes? Councillor Phillips.
If there's no further discussion, I'd like to make a motion that council accept the recreational facility operations update and instruct administration to move forward with the reopening of the fitness center with reduced hours, and move forward with further opening of the facility as future COVID-19 restrictions are lifted.
And so what date are we looking at then? You said as early as this weekend, or do we just go with next week, or?
I know that we've touched base with the 2 staff members that we're looking at bringing back, and they're ready to come back tomorrow. We have their offer letters of reinstatement, and we could potentially bring them in one day, do a quick reorientation as to what the new regulations mean in the booking system, and we could potentially be open for Saturday.
Okay. Okay. Any other questions? Okay.
All in favor?
Whoops, all in favor of that motion? And that's carried. Thank you. Okay, we'll go on to 7.3, recreation facility naming and sponsorship and advertising policy. Mr. Ament.
Okay, we're back. So I'm just bringing this policy back. We had the discussion a couple of weeks ago with council about the facility namings. You had some questions about the financial component and how the funds would be allocated. I know that Betty has completed sort of the financial look and made some recommendations with regard to the sponsorship funding, generating advertising opportunities. The funds should be spent, perhaps the recommendation on, to benefit the current users of the facility. If it's put into reserves, it could be held for a number of years. So those sponsors wouldn't necessarily see the money that they're putting into it benefiting the current users of the facilities. I'm not sure if council has any other questions related to that. Perhaps Betty could help or answer some of those questions.
Anybody have any questions regarding the sponsorship and naming? I don't have any. It's pretty straightforward to me, so. No, okay. Seeing none, Councillor Auld.
No more discussion. I'll just make the motion. Be it resolved that council approve the recreation facility naming, sponsorship and advertising policy 004/2021 as presented.
Okay. All in favor of that motion? And that's carried. Okay. Thanks, Mr. Ament. And we will move on to 7.4. The election agreements, RFT for election agreements. Is that Ms. Hartling?
Yes, it is. Thank you, Your Worship. The Local Authorities Elections Act requires that a resolution of council for the municipality to enter into any kind of agreement with other local authorities, in this case, school boards that may or may not have contiguous borders. With the Wildrose School Division, they are looking at us running a portion of running the election for them. And with the city of Red Deer, they're acting as returning officer for the Red Deer Catholic Separate School Division, and they're wanting to share the facility. Just a couple of comments on the agreement. So I've provided the agreements for you. One of the things that I'd just like to highlight is that there is a sharing of costs. So with the Wildrose School Division, they would be responsible for 1/3 of the facility costs for the facility for the advance votes. And they would also help subsidize the election by 50%. Because they would pay half the costs for like the voting machines and whatnot. The city of Red Deer, on the other hand, is just sharing the facility. And so we would ask them to contribute 1/3 of the costs of the facilities as well. Organizationally, the agreements will require some additional time, particularly for the returning officer and the substitute returning officer. And that's just before planning coming up to the election. And on the election itself, on the election advanced vote and institutional vote and election days. Wildrose School Division is responsible for taking all of the nominations. They're providing all of the ballots and the ballot boxes for the election, and the advertising is their responsibility. We will be doing the ballot count for the election, and then we will release the sealed ballot boxes back to them. The city of Red Deer basically will be just sharing the facility. One of the things that did come up in the discussions was the importance of ensuring there's no kind of, alleviating that possibility that people from outside of the town boundaries are coming into the facility. So they have agreed that, that they would be providing a voting station for the Catholic School Division at the voting station in town for Clearwater County. The other thing is that they've also, because we're depending on where things are with COVID, we are anticipating that there's going to be, of course, additional work around ensuring that COVID restrictions are and safety are upheld. So they have agreed to assist in the provision of an information officer / health officer that would kind of act at the front of the station, checking identification, making sure we'll have a couple of maps set up and just checking to make sure that they're eligible to vote in the municipal election. And then we would also, we haven't quite figured out what we would be doing for COVID, but potentially taking temperatures, asking, going through a brief questionnaire in terms of if there's been any travel, if there's any fever or cough or anything like that. So that additional staff person will be helpful as well, because we are doing both paper ballots and we're doing the automated voting machines as well. We're kind of splitting it. And so having some additional staff would be helpful in terms of providing information and doing the health screening. So, I provided copies of the agreements. And I also did up a floor plan for the election that will be attached to both of the agreements as an addendum. And the addendum just allows us, having it attached as an addendum rather than a schedule, allows us to go back and edit if needed. Does anybody have any questions?
No, I'm just looking at the floor plan. So, okay. So all that would be in the community center then would be the Wild Rose,
Wild Rose, yes,
Red Deer Catholic,
that's right.
and Town Municipal.
That's right.
Okay.
And we tried to create, like the arrows are there and we would have, spacing markers on the floor. We would have arrows for the direction that we want people to go. And the intent of that is that we don't want people going back and forth all the time. And we want to keep traffic moving and kind of a traffic moving without them having to come back and forth and whatnot.
Okay. Did you have a comment, Ms. Button?
I just wanted to say we all know there's a lot of moving parts still because we
Yeah.
also have the perhaps Senate and referendum questions, which is
Correct.
why we'd be having paper ballots and electronic voting in the same station. But I think what is key for council to understand when you're looking at these agreements and this floor plan is that the only people who need to come to this voting station at the Loose Hoppet will be town residents. And then they'll take care of all of their municipal voting and Senate referendum, and then either the public or the separate school division vote. County residents will attend county voting stations. It's not in the same facility.
Not even for the school division.
No,
No.
because Red Deer Catholic will be providing their own RO there. If a county resident shows up to vote for school division, they won't turn them away, but there should be no reason to, because that county resident will have already been at a county voting station to cast their municipal ballot, and the Red Deer Catholic's regional polling station is there as well.
Okay.
Your worship, they are trying to create a one-stop shopping kind of thing, one-stop election type of thing. So you're not required to go to 2 or 3 facilities to do your vote. You should only have to go to one facility to do your voting for Senate referendum questions and school election.
Yeah, makes
and
total sense.
municipal. Yeah.
Yeah, total sense.
Yeah.
Any other questions? No. Okay, sorry, I'm trying to get my. Okay, so we have a couple of recommended alternatives. Sorry. Councillor Narang.
Sure. I'll make the first one. Be it resolved that council approve the returning officer to proceed with the election agreement with the Wild Rose School Division as presented.
Okay, all in favor of that motion? That's carried. Councillor Fraser.
I move that be it resolved that council approve the returning officer to proceed with the election agreement with the city of Red Deer as presented.
Any other questions on that? All in favor of that motion? And that's carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. So 7.5. The RFD for the election bylaw.
Thank you again, your worship. Well, as you all know, the next municipal election will take place on October 18th. The Local Authorities Elections Act legislation describes the conduct of local elections across Alberta. There were some changes to the Local Authorities Elections Act, and so the updated bylaw is a reflection of those changes. In addition, because we are using alternative voting equipment, that information needs to be contained in the bylaw. So essentially, those are the two reasons why the new bylaw was established. We also tried to incorporate more information into the bylaw for by-elections and votes on bylaw or question. So it's a consistent bylaw that could be used going forward unless there's legislative changes, so. Again, so council has, they have already provided a couple of resolutions on the advanced vote dates and the institutional vote dates. And I've just included these in the report just because it's in a report on the election itself, so. To ensure alignment with the changes to the Local Authorities Elections Act, I thought what I would do is just go through some of the kind of notable changes in the bylaw, if that's okay with.
Sure, absolutely.
council. So under section 3, there were definitions added. For example, advanced vote, automated voting system, ballot card, by-election, election day, nomination day, and substitute returning officer. And these are really just a reflection of some of the changes to legislation, as well as some of the requirements that I felt should be in the bylaw that perhaps weren't there previously. Section 4 was added. It just reiterates that when election day is and adds the when a by-election could be held. Section 5 was expanded to recognize the agreements can be made with one or more elected authorities in the same area for the conduct of an election. As we will be sharing a voting station with the Catholic School Division and the Wild Rose School Division. The bylaw also makes it clear that whichever elected authority is responsible for the conduct of the election, that they must be complying with the act. And I think that that was one thing that I wanted in the bylaw. Under section 6, basically it was just the change with the substitute returning officer, because that was a new requirement that was under legislation. Section 7 was revised and expanded in response to some of the changes to the Local Authorities Elections Act when nominations could be accepted. So it's changed to January 1st rather than just nomination day, and reiterates legislation for the minimum requirement of 5 eligible signatures, and that candidates are responsible for ensuring their nominations filed meet the requirements of the act. That was another thing that I wanted in there, because it makes it very clear who's responsible for ensuring the nominations are filed. The nominations that are filed as per the act. Under section 9, we followed some of the suggestions from VOTEC. So typically what happens is the mayor is at the top, the office of the mayor is at the top, and then councillors are listed underneath that on a ballot card. However, because of the automated voting system, they've recommended that the office of councillors goes first and that the office of mayor goes second, because once you hit the cast my vote button, that, you basically can't go back. So they would have to go through the process of voting for councillors and then the mayor before they could cast their vote. If they were to vote for the mayor and cast their vote, they could not proceed with voting for the councillors, the office of councillors. So they said by putting it second, it just alleviates, the potential for problems with someone casting their vote for mayor first and hitting the button and then realizing, oh, well, I can't go back now. So that's one of the things with the automated voting system. So you can't have a spoiled ballot with an automated voting system, where with a paper ballot, people can say, oh, I put it in the wrong spot, or they can come back and like, we go through a process with them to mark it as a spoiled ballot, and they could, if the deputy returning officer or returning officer allows it, they could get another vote, right? The spoiled ballot doesn't get counted as a regular, like as a voted ballot or as a vote. But with the automated machines, it doesn't work that way. So it's a precautionary measure.
Okay.
Under section 11, expands the advance vote to allow for an advanced vote for by-elections and a vote on a question or bylaw. So again, it's just legislation, but it was just included in the bylaw. It also includes the option to use automated voting systems for advanced votes.
Okay.
Section 12, it gives us the option to use an automated voting system just as an option for institutional voting stations. Now, that's something that, I'll kind of look into a little further, but at this point, the plan is to go with a paper ballot, but by having it in the bylaw, it provides us with the two options. Section 14 to 16, and this is where, as required under legislation, we have to outline the use of the automated voting systems, and we have to describe the voting procedure and other legislative requirements under the act. So we have to basically outline what the process is, and that, the process would be explained and what the procedure would be. Section 17, again, it outlines requirements for sealing of ballot boxes, also outlining the procedure for automated voting systems. 18 is voter eligibility based on the Local Authorities Elections Act. The town will follow the requirements as set out under legislation. There's no changes. It's just to include it in the bylaw. Section 19, marking of the ballot, follows legislation for paper ballots, while also outlining that voting procedures for automated voting systems have to comply with section 15 of the bylaw, which is the voting procedures. Section 20 is when a ballot is marked incorrectly. So this would be like a spoiled ballot or a replacement ballot. It just outlines what the requirements are. And again, as I noted earlier, is just once you hit that cast my vote button on an automated machine, it's
Okay.
Section 21, post vote and counting procedures. Section 22 is rejected. Ballot cards, section 23 is procedures for recount. And it really, in this one, it's just it has to outline that the ballot tape would be used for a recount. And section 24 is disposition of election material. Everything is it's all in accordance with the act, with the exception of the automated voting systems. And in that case, we have to outline what the procedures are because they're a little different.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Does anybody have any questions? No? Okay. We have a recommended alternative. Councillor Narang.
Be it resolved that council give first reading to the election bylaw 2002/27 as presented.
All in favor of that motion? It's carried. Councillor Brown.
To make a motion that to be resolved that council give second reading to election bylaw 2002/27.
All in favor of that motion? Carried. Councillor Ald.
I'll make another motion, be it resolved that council give unanimous consent to move to third reading to election bylaw 2002/27.
Okay. All in favor of that motion? Carried. Councillor Phillips.
I'd like to make a motion, be it resolved that council give third and final reading to election bylaw 2002/27.
Okay. All in favor of that motion? And carried.
Thank
Thanks,
you,
Ms.
your
Ryan.
worship and council.
Okay, and so we'll move on to number 8. Oh, there is no correspondence for action. Sorry, I'm just going to get back to my online. Okay, correspondence for information, just looking for a motion, please, to accept 9.1 to 9.7 as course for information. Councillor Fraser, all in favor of that motion? And that's carried. Number 10, the action list. Anybody have any questions on the action list? No? Okay. Councillor Phillips?
I'll make a motion to accept the action list as presented.
Thank you. Oh, all in favor of that motion? Thanks. Okay, we'll move on to number 11. Does anybody have any administrative inquiries? No? Does anybody have any notice of motion? Oh, I was hoping somebody would for Dean. Okay. All right. Seeing none. It is 7:55. I will call for a 5-minute break. And we will come back to go into, looks like just a quick closed session. So